Okay, so I intend for you to read and listen to this PowerPoint after you have already done the reading. I swear to you, it's not going to make very much sense. So if you have not done your readings and stuff already, just stop doing this. Go back, do that, then come back to this. Especially the problem solving article, because I'm just not covering that entire thing for you here. I'm just only literally adding some follow-ups to it. So definitely make sure you've done that. But you probably do want to have gone through this before you do your journal assignment, because your journal assignment is about walking through the problem-solving process. And I'm going to help you. I'm going to add some steps and some tips and things for that. And it might help also to do it to listen to this before you do your application assignment, which is making a pamphlet about a problem-focused coping strategy. This just might be something, there might be something in here that you want to include. So, okay, proceed no further until you have done the readings. Okay. The major emphasis that I would like to get across to you from this entire sort of problem-focused coping place is don't try to tell other people what to do. You know what? Don't even try to just decide to tell you what to do. Actually go through the problem solving and decision making processes. That will help you more. You will generate more decisions. You will generate better decisions. You will solve problems more effectively if you don't just take suggestions from other people, for example, or just do the thing that you are always doing. And you will actually be helpful to people if you help them go through this process themselves. Okay? Ultimately, we don't want them to be dependent on us. Even mental health professionals, the point is not job security. The point is to get everyone out of mental health treatment because they are now so healthy and so effective at doing this on their own that they don't need you, right? So just make sure, sometimes that is, we say in mental health that everybody has some kind of need that draws them into the field, something that doing the therapy thing will satisfy. And that's one for a lot of people, is just wanting to be helpful and wanting to be right and wanting to advise people, wanting, in fact, other people to be dependent on them, to feel important. And we got to cut that out, right? Whether you're a mental health professional or not, you ultimately will actually help people better if you honor their own experience, that is their own phenomenology, their own personal, unique world, and honor their autonomy. They are their own people, whether they are adults or adolescents or children. They certainly deserve to have a certain amount of their autonomy honored also. And again, like we sort of have talked about before, when you give even really good suggestions and a person does them, they don't get to take any of the credit. We don't want that. We want to be building people up, not building them a dependence on us. Okay, so I want you to consider that there might be a couple of additional steps that you could put into the problem-solving process from the article that would make it even more effective than how it's described. So one of the parts, obviously, is defining your problem. Sometimes, and we'll actually talk about this more in a couple of slides, that means breaking them also down into smaller problems or sub-problems, pieces of the larger problem, and that's awesome. And I would like to suggest that one thing that's really, really super helpful when you do this is defining these problems as positive needs. So a lot of times we have a tendency to say, I want to not do this, or I want things not to be this way, or I want to do this less. And instead of that, see if you can flip it around, because it will help you to be more creative, and it will help you to be more targeted and more effective in your strategizing to get that thing done. So for example, instead of saying, I need to not lose my temper so quickly, say, I need to hold on to my clarity and patience longer, right? This is an incredibly useful thing to do in relationships. So when, I'll just make a little side note here, when you are in a relationship and you need or want something from the other person, phrase that as a positive need instead of saying, stop coming home so late. You say, I need you really to be at home by 5:30 so that you can help me with the kids. Or, stop criticizing me all the time. Instead, say, I'd like it much better, or I need for you to speak to me in a way that addresses your concerns, but that's a little more positive, right? It's very cool, very good. So this will help you in all of your problem solving. It changes things around too, so that now you're working towards something rather than pushing against or working away from something. All right, so 2 more additional steps that I think can help make that problem-solving process more effective. 1, somewhere before you decide. You could do this before the brainstorming kind of section, or you could do it right after the brainstorming section. But add a step called defining the criteria for an acceptable solution, because we miss this a lot, and a lot of times if you will do that beforehand, it just makes the decision so much clearer. It gets a lot of extra stuff out of the way that you don't really need to think about. So what does an acceptable solution actually mean, right? It means maybe that both parties need to win at least a little bit. Maybe it means that whatever an acceptable solution is to this problem, I still have to have enough money, no matter what I do, to meet my basic budget needs, or whatever it is. And one thing this may involve is looking at your values. So you what. You might not know this before you actually do it, like actually really list them out and say, an acceptable solution has to be biblically consistent, or an acceptable solution has to, it has to, value the diversity of everyone involved, or an acceptable solution has to, be something that can be completed without too much effort. Whatever that is, and these really might be values kinds of things, this step, even though it's an extra step, can save you a lot of time in the end, sort of going through and trying stuff and then realizing it doesn't fit. And then one more, after you've sort of gone through all your options and you've picked one, just make yourself a double check kind of step. Right? Make a step where you go back and check for any biases that might have been present in the decision making, because you might find that you need to go back and reevaluate. This also can help you because going through with a decision, multiple decisions, multiple strategies for problem solving that end up either not being consistent with what you say is an acceptable solution, or that had bias sort of implicitly in them, they just won't work. Right? And then you get frustrated, and then you feel like you have to go back to the drawing board. And so these 2 steps can save you a lot of time. Okay, this slide and the next slide these are just some ideas. These are just some additional tips. When things feel really big and overwhelming, break the problem down into smaller problems. Break an ultimate goal down into sub-goals. That might be parts of a goal. It might be steps in a goal. So parts would be things that would happen kind of at the same time, but in a different place or a different way or with different people. Or it might be steps, which would mean, accomplish this thing first, and then this thing, take care of this thing next, and then finally this thing. This can be a good strategy when you are feeling a little stumped, is start by imagining the end goal and work backwards. If you're having some trouble kind of figuring out what the steps might be working forwards, just an idea. This is called the analog strategy. Identify a previously solved problem that was similar, and then think about how that got solved. Actually, whether it was solved well or not, right? So you can think back to something that was similar, and if that got solved well, that might be halfway to the way of solving this problem that you're working on now. Even if it got solved badly, now that you have hindsight about it, you're probably quite likely to be able to see where it went wrong. And at minimum, just not repeat the same mistakes as the last time. But that goes a long way towards saying, things like what's criteria for an acceptable solution, or I know that these solutions aren't likely to work. It just saves you some trouble. If that has not happened, if you feel like you've never done anything like this before, consider creating a metaphor for it. Sometimes when we put things into the abstract, it gives us a lot more freedom of thought about how to think about it, about, what possibilities there might be. It sort of just loosens up our thinking a lot. No metaphor. Metaphors are metaphors. They are not the actual thing, which means a metaphor can only stretch so far. But a good metaphor will stretch pretty far. So it should help you generate, some good alternatives and things like that. Sometimes you just need to take a break. And take a break from actively thinking about whatever that problem is and do something else. Something specifically that distracts you from that thing. So daydreaming, exercising, or sleep, those are the best options. Because what that does is it allows your mind to just really put it in the background and percolate it, rather than having all this interference from what we would call, your conscious mind, which isn't getting anywhere, is stuck. So allow it to percolate back there. Oftentimes that will lead to an aha kind of insight sort of moment. So it's definitely an actually worthwhile strategy. Even if it feels kind of like a cop-out, it actually can be a really effective strategy. And then this slide is it's a really important slide, and it's kind of a fun slide because it just has other, playful things that you can do. But one of the things that will happen is, we'll realize that there's something that we want to accomplish, a goal that we want to get to. One of the things that we have to do as part of the problem-solving process is recognize what are the barriers to getting that done. And then those barriers, overcoming each of those barriers, might end up being, the steps in our process, or it might be some of the parts of our problem. Is, there's some things that I want to do, but in order to be able to do that, I have to overcome something or other. And sometimes one of the obstacles is just the way you're thinking about the problem solving. So sometimes when you're feeling really stuck, these are some things that you might try. So try literally moving things around. Get out some paper, or get out a game board, get out some dice, get out some coins, get out some crayons, get out something, and make a physical representation of what the problem is. And then change it, then manipulate it, actually move things around with your hands, actually draw it from a different perspective. Just you would be so surprised. This is fun. You should do it just for fun. Because it is so interesting how much space that opens up in our minds for thinking about things. Another sort of problem-solving kind of trick that we know about is thinking outside the box. So you probably have seen this 9-dot problem thing. If you haven't, if you're not familiar with what I'm thinking about, just click that link and go and check it out. This is another example. What happens once in June, once in July, and twice in August? Most people are thinking about holidays or summer activities or something like that, and actually it's just the letter U. That's all we're going for. So allowing yourself to get a lot of perspective really, really change things up. This is one of the reasons that we say in the brainstorming stage of something that you should just be fine being totally ridiculous. Because sometimes what we need is just a really, really big perspective shift, really thinking outside the box. Another thing that's sort of like this is overcoming what we call functional fixedness, which means the idea that all things kind of work in the same way, that they need to be used in the way that they're intended. This is a fun little video that you can watch about, about using things in a way that is, again, sort of outside the box. And So all of these things about overcoming obstacles are sort of about really envisioning the problem in a different way. This is one of the most powerful things about talking to somebody else as part of the problem-solving process, is that you sometimes that person can bring in some of this freshness that it's hard to get for yourself. So, okay, I hope that that was helpful in terms of following up and maybe just adding a little bit to the problem-solving process to make it more effective.